The third booklet's entitled The People Who've Impacted Our Region. Could you tell us about some of the people who've made a special impact here?
Yes, certainly. As I mentioned before, God has raised up some quite amazing people in Merseyside over the years, and I've written about quite a number of these, including people I've already mentioned, such as William Lockhart, who was a Birkenhead evangelist, who later went on to establish Doctor Tabernacles, a well-known church in Liverpool. And although he was a layman, he had a congregation of 1,200 people, so he was an amazing man. Also Reginald Ratcliffe, mentioned in one of the revivals in the Liverpool City Mission. People like John Hambleton, he was a Brethren evangelist, and God used powerfully, not only in Liverpool but in other parts of the country. Also people like Bishop Ryle, he was the first Bishop of Liverpool, fervent evangelical, and he brought much blessing to Liverpool. So there's a lot of people who have been a great blessing to Liverpool. One of them, as you can see his picture on the cover of this booklet, is a man by the name of Alexander Balfour. Now, he was not a speaker, but he was a very wealthy Christian businessman. He did an immense amount of good for Liverpool. He supported a lot of Christian ministries so that people could operate in evangelistic teaching ministry in many different situations in Merseyside. And he was a really great man, and he was a man who was held in great affection. If you go into St John's Gardens behind St George's Hall, you'll see that there's a monument to him. And there was a book written about his life by a man called Reverend Lundy. And at the end of the booklet, this is the comment he made about him, which summed up his life. Liverpool, that great community for which he so greatly pleaded daily till the day when he lay down to die. Liverpool was graven on his heart, like Jerusalem on the heart of the exiled Jews. To succeed, to elevate, to bless Liverpool was the consuming passion of his life. Great man. Another man I've written about who's been a real inspiration to me was a man named Canon Hobson. Now, at one time, he was a curate of Christ Church in Oxton, but he was asked to take on a new parish which was formed in Liverpool, in the back part of Liverpool, known as Windsor, part of Toxteth. And he took on the challenge, and at that time, it was such a bad area that newspaper adverts would have something containing people from Windsor need not apply. That's how bad it. They didn't want people working for them who came from Windsor. That's how bad it was. And he took this on. And when he started, there were only 5 members in the congregation. But he was a man with a great anointing on his ministry. He was a man of great prayer. And this, as I've mentioned before, is often a key factor to blessing on people's ministry. And God certainly did bless his ministry. At the end of his ministry, he had no less than 3,000 people in his congregation, so he made a great impact on Liverpool. So there's many more I could tell you about, and this is, as I say, there's a long list of people who God has really greatly anointed and blessed in Liverpool, and this book is about many of those.
The fourth booklet is entitled Inspiring Testimonies. Would you like to tell us about some of the people who've experienced God in a remarkable way?
Yes. Over the years, I've got to hear about a lot of amazing testimonies, people who live in the Merseyside and Chester area or used to live and who are no longer with us. And I thought it'd be a good idea to collect a lot of these testimonies in one booklet. Some of them are very inspiring. People who experience God in a most remarkable way, in salvation, deliverance from drugs and alcohol and things like that. Also, people who've experienced remarkable healings, and also people who have had angelic encounters. I'd just like to tell you briefly about 2 of those testimonies. You've seen the cover of book 4, there's a picture of a family. They're known as the Matthews family, Gemini and Sajani Matthew. Now, they have a most amazing testimony, one of the most amazing testimonies I've ever heard in my life. They live in Upton in the Wirral. They're both nurses. One works in Arrow Park Hospital and the other works in Countess of Chester Hospital. And this happened in 2007, and it was an amazing encounter, and such that they weren't Christians at the time, but as a result of that experience, they both were soundly converted, and today they are going on well with the Lord, and they're most delightful Christians, good friends of mine. Another one I'd just like to mention briefly was my first pastor's wife, Florence Burnham. She, as a young girl, she had TB in both lungs. She had one was completely gone, the other was half gone, and God told her He was going to heal her, and He gave a picture of 2 new lungs. And she believed God, and one day the Lord just spoke to her and said, "Get up or die." And she knew she had to do that. And she got up. Nobody would help her because they said, "You'll kill yourself." And she said, "No, God has told me." She got up, she had to dress herself. It took her a long time. And she started to make her way out. And she took one step at a time, very painfully. But as she made each step, strength came within her. And then she ended up running. And that was a wonderful testimony. Later on in her life, during the war, she had a very severe heart condition, and in which she was taken around in a wheelchair during the whole of the war years. But God again raised her up. In the 1930s, she and her husband applied for missionary service, but they were turned down because of her appalling health record. But she lived by God's divine power, and it's unbelievable. But in 1970, they actually went out on the mission field, and she was in the 60s, and they went all around Africa. They were there for 18 years, and it wasn't in the nice parts; it was in the rough parts, in the bush. And they only came back because of his ill health. He was a big, strong man, and she lived until she was 91 years of age, and it's a real testimony to God's amazing power. So that's just 2 of the testimonies, and there's other wonderful testimonies in that book.
Geoff, what is the purpose of writing about what God has done in the past, and what is the relevance for us today?
Yes, I believe it is relevant, very relevant, because firstly, it's important to really know what God has done in the past. If you read the scriptures, God told the children of Israel to tell their children about all the wonderful things He had done in their past, such as all the signs and wonders when He brought them out of Egypt, all He did for them going through the wilderness into the promised land, and all the great exploits of throughout their history. So it was important for them. I believe it's important for us also to tell of what God has done in our own locality. I think secondly, it is part of our Christian heritage, and as such I believe we should value that, in that sense. Thirdly, when we consider all the tremendous things God has done in our locality in the past, I believe it should really encourage faith and expectancy that God will do it again. God has not changed. Jesus is the same yesterday and today and forever. And He's done, people say that Liverpool Merseyside is a really hard place, and maybe that is true. But, I would say that by virtue of the fact that God has done it before, and some of these amazing things we've heard of today, then He's well and truly able to do it again. And I believe that the need is such. Our country is in a terrible state, and I believe we should be seeking God for a fresh outpouring of the Holy Spirit, And what he's done in the past, what he did in 1934 with those wonderful meetings with Edward Jeffreys, I believe we should be asking God to do the same again in this generation. Those men, they serve God in their generation. I believe, it is for us to serve God in our generation. And we should be looking to God to bring a fresh move of God and a revival in our land. In Wales between 1750 and 1850 there was no less than 15 revivals. And whenever one revival was on the wane, the people of God would come together and they would earnestly seek God to bring another revival. I know it's often said that a revival is, it's an act of God and we can't do anything about it, but that's over an act of God, we can't do anything about it. But if we earnestly seek God, I believe God is not a disappointment. As I say, during that period of 100 years in Wales, every time they came before God, they cried out to God, and he kept on, bringing a fresh revival into the principality. So, I believe that the needs of our country is such that that is exactly what we should be doing today. This is what he wrote, and I think these words are very relevant, and I'd like this to go up on the screen. Unless we are favoured with frequent revivals and a strong, powerful work of the Spirit of God, we shall in great degree degenerate and have only a name to live by. Religion will soon lose its vigour, the ministry will hardly retain its lustre and glory, and iniquity will, of consequence, abound. If that doesn't sum up, our present generation, I don't know what does. And so, I believe we should really seek God for that fresh outpouring of His Spirit. We should seek to look to God to turn our country back again to being a God-fearing nation and a country which was as a stronghold of the Christian faith like it used to be. That's my prayer, and that's what I believe. This is how we should be praying in these days.
I'd like to thank Geoff for all that he shared with us today. And we've had an insight into the amazing and mighty things that God has done in this area. If you would like to know more about this, you're free to contact the website, and you could email or write him. All the information will be on the screen. We trust this has been a great blessing to you, and we thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.